Welcome into a solo version of the Oxford Exxon Podcast. It's Wednesday, March the 16th. Thank you for making us a part of your morning. Sorry for a little bit of a late start. Had to do a little bit more show prep since I'm here by myself today. It is a mailbag version of the Oxford Exxon Podcast, but we'll talk about some other stuff as well. Ole Miss loses last night in Hammond, Louisiana. We'll talk about that. A report came out yesterday that I believe to be 100% accurate that Kermit Davis will return for his fifth season at Ole Miss. We'll talk about that as well. Buzz Williams had some interesting things to say. There's some quarterback rumors in the NFL. So a lot going on. We'll get to it. The NCAA tournament began last night in Dayton, continues tonight in Dayton, gets started in earnest on Thursday. I will tell you that tomorrow, maybe even later today, we'll have up another podcast. I'll be talking to Chris Lee of Southeastern14.com. We will preview the NCAA tournament, and we'll also talk about the first weekend of SEC baseball. Ole Miss goes to Auburn, starts on Thursday night. SEC baseball begins Thursday and Friday around the league, so we'll talk about all of those topics as well. First, I want to tell you that we're brought to you by the Oxford Exxon, of course, every single day. The Oxford Exxon, Highway 6 West in Oxford. Go by, fill up. Check out all that they have to offer, plate lunches, everything. I don't have all the material here in front of me. Chase is on vacation today. He'll be back on Friday, ready to cover baseball and all of that stuff. Next week's going to be a really busy week for us, so I'm glad he got some time away with his family to kind of charge the battery because it's going to get pretty heated next week with spring football, pro day, baseball, everything else going on. But anyway, Highway 6 West in Oxford. Check out all that they have in there. It's always clean. Always fresh, everything at the Oxford Exxon, Highway 6 West in Oxford. I'm coming to you from the Clark Ford Studios. Clark Ford is in Amory, Mississippi. 662-257-1900 is that number. Call it. Ask for Corey Clark. Tell Corey what Ford product you're looking for. He'll send you a quote within 15 minutes in business hours, right to the bottom line. No hassle, no haggle. You get your quote. The rest is completely up to you. You can shop that quote around. Or you can do what I do, what I recommend that you do as well, and that's hop into a Clark Ford today. You will love the product. You'll love the service. 662-257-1900. Chris Lee will join me later today on for a Thursday Oxford Exxon podcast. He'll join on the Rafters Music and Food hotline. Rafters Music and Food. Be a great place this weekend. If you're coming to Oxford, great place to watch the tournament, watch Ole Miss Auburn. Grab a burger, grab a po' boy, appetizers, great beer selection, full bar, and more. Rafters, Music and Food on the Square in Oxford and also in New Albany. The mailbag is brought to you each week by Whitney McNutt of Tommy Morgan Incorporated Realtors, serving you for all your real estate needs in Oxford and Tupelo. Whitney sells condos, land, commercial, and residential family homes. 662-567-2573 or 662-842-3844 to get in touch with Whitney. And goodness, if you're selling real estate or buying real estate in the Oxford area these days, stuff goes on the market one day, it is gone by the end of the day. You need a realtor. You're not going to be able to do it by yourself because realtors are going to know about things that are going on the market before they go on the market. If you want to have a chance, you've got to have a realtor you can trust. I recommend Whitney McNutt of Tommy Morgan Incorporated Realtors and appreciate her sponsoring the mailbag each week at rebelgrove.com. So we'll get to those questions in a little bit. First, Ole Miss earlier this week debuted at number 1, moved up to number 1 in the Division I baseball rankings. They took that ranking to Hammond, Louisiana last night. Lost to Southeastern Louisiana 5-1. That game at Alumni Field there in Hammond. Jack Washburn took the loss. He allowed a couple of runs on 4 hits, 3 walks, struck out 5. Kemp Alderman got Ole Miss on the board first. He hit a RBI double off the left field wall that brought home T.J. McCants from second base. They gave Ole Miss a 1-0 lead. That was as long as the lead lasted, though. Southeastern Louisiana got the run back in the home half on a solo home run from Tyler Finke. Then Shea Thomas came across on a wild pitch to put Southeastern Louisiana ahead 2-1, and they held on from there. Ole Miss had some errors. Southeastern added a couple of runs in the 7th, another on a solo home run in the 8th to make it 5-1. Ole Miss had some chances in the middle innings. They couldn't get that big hit that they needed, so they lost. Ole Miss now 13-3. Southeastern Louisiana 8-9, which is an odd record for a team that now has wins over Arkansas and Ole Miss. But baseball's a weird game. So, like I said earlier, Ole Miss and Auburn start on Thursday. Thursday's game on national television. Friday and Saturday's games will air on SEC Network Plus, and all can be heard on the Ole Miss Radio Network. So we'll talk more about baseball and stuff later in the week. I've said this for a long time. People don't like when I do this. These midweek games, I don't pay any attention to them early in the season. I don't pay attention to teams that get super hot, like Tennessee. And frankly, I don't pay a lot of attention to teams that get super cold, like Mississippi State. I've done this for a long time. I know I don't cover baseball every day anymore, but I did for a long time. The postseason destinations for these teams are determined by what happens in the 30 conference games. That's what happens. This weekend's big. You don't want to lose in Hammond. It's not the end of the world. Any more than winning in Hammond is going to do anything for you. What Ole Miss does against Auburn matters. What Ole Miss does in the other 9 SEC weekends, that matters. That's what's going to determine whether you host, whether you're a national seed, whether you make the tournament, whether you're a 2 seed or a 3 seed. That's where all that stuff comes in. And maybe the extreme might be a team like Mississippi State that has lost more than its fair share of non-league games. Those losses could come back and haunt them from a seeding standpoint. And I don't think this will happen, for example, but let's just say Mississippi State goes 23-7 in the league. They'll host. Simple as that. What you do in conference play is going to determine your postseason destination, and everybody gets hung up on rankings and such. I get it. I do. I understand. Just don't think they matter. It's cool to be ranked number 1 on March the 15th, March the 16th. It doesn't matter. The big series for Ole Miss is this weekend. There are some issues. That lineup without Kevin Graham is not as explosive as it was with him, obviously. I think they're still adjusting to that. They're not getting some of the timely hits that you want. I think there are some concerns about defense. They've made some errors that have cost them in games, errors that didn't cost them in games because they were so far ahead. They won a whole bunch of games early in the season by run rules and such, where some of the mistakes that they made didn't come back to haunt them. Last night was different. Last night the mistakes let the game get out of hand and let Southeastern Louisiana build a big enough lead that kind of takes the steam out of a potential comeback. So timely hitting is an issue. Defense is an issue. As Chase said on Sunday, base running is an issue. There's some fundamental things this team has to get better, and they miss Kevin Graham. They got to get him back. They got to figure out how to navigate these next 5-6 weeks without him. But conference play is what matters, as someone says. And the only number 1 that matters is at the end in Omaha, as Hardman 478 says in the chat. He's exactly right. You'd rather be ranked number 1 than not ranked number 1 right now, but I don't know that it means much. And last night's loss is not going to mean much at the end of the season if they take care of business in conference play. Simple as that. And if you don't take care of business in conference play, the loss in Hammond won't be what cost you. The losses in the SEC will. The NCAA tournament got started last night. Indiana beats Wyoming 66-58. Trace Jackson Davis led Indiana with 29 points. They beat a Wyoming team that frankly did not belong in the tournament. We'll get to that in a minute. Wyoming did not belong in the tournament. You can argue that Indiana didn't belong in the tournament, but Wyoming did not belong in the tournament. That got shown in Dayton. If you've never been to Dayton for the first 4, you'll be shocked when you go at the atmosphere in that building. They absolutely buy into it. The people of Dayton do. It was an electric atmosphere a few years ago when Ole Miss played Brigham Young in the first 4. I'll never forget expecting a gym to be sort of dead and a gym being anything but dead. It was a really cool environment. So I'm sure it was an experience for Indiana and Wyoming last night. Indiana wins. They're into the field of 64. So is Texas Southern. In a battle of 16s, Texas Southern beats Texas A&M Corpus Christi 76-67. So they advance to play Kansas on Thursday night. So I guess congratulations, sort of, to Texas Southern. 2 games tonight in Dayton. Bryant faces Wright State in another battle of 16 seeds. And then a team that I don't believe belongs in the tournament, Rutgers. They faced Notre Dame in a battle of 11s. Those two, the two winners will advance to the NCAA tournament on Friday. So speaking of Rutgers, speaking of Notre Dame, they're both in the tournament. Texas A&M isn't. Tuesday night, Buzz Williams addressed that situation following Texas A&M's NIT win over Alcorn State. I watched a lot of SEC basketball down the stretch. For whatever reason, I just found some of the races pretty interesting. I like a lot of the teams. There were several of the teams that I enjoyed watching. I enjoy watching Auburn because they're just this interesting club that has these two elite, dynamic post players in Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler, and they have this odd, inconsistent, yet explosive guard play. Auburn's one of the teams I can't wait to watch them in the tournament because I don't know what's going to happen. I love watching Tennessee. They're this gritty machine that has all sorts of chemistry. They can beat you in a number of ways. Kennedy Chandler really improved as the season went along. I like their team. I like Rick Barnes' teams. They're so fundamentally sound. I watched a lot of Arkansas. I watched a lot of Florida, knowing that there was a lot of drama with Mike White and what was going to happen or not happen with Mike. And in the course of that, I watched a lot of Texas A&M. And Texas A&M in the last month of the season was as good as any team in the SEC not named Tennessee. And they proved that. They won 5 of the last 6 regular season games. They went into the SEC tournament in Tampa last week. They beat Florida on Thursday, beat Auburn on Friday, beat Arkansas on Saturday, beat Auburn and Arkansas pretty convincingly, whipped Arkansas, just wiped them off the floor, and then ran out of juice against a really good Tennessee team. And I thought for sure Texas A&M would get in the tournament. They didn't. Buzz Williams, if you haven't seen it, find it. It's on rebelgrove.com. You can find it on Twitter as well. Buzz Williams with about a 7.5, 8-minute statement last night. It's emotional at the end. It's easy, and I know a lot of Ole Miss people do it because of their feelings about Ross Bjork, and I totally understand that. I like to make fun of Texas A&M and the cult and the rings on the table and all of that stuff. But everything Buzz Williams said last night is right. You cannot look at all of the metrics. You cannot look at what the NCAA says are the standards to make that tournament and not put Texas A&M over Rutgers or Wyoming, maybe even Notre Dame. There's no reason Texas A&M wasn't in the tournament. 12 wins against SEC opponents. They have wins over Auburn, Arkansas. They have quality wins. Florida, quality wins that a lot of those Big Ten teams, for whatever reason, the committee appeared to be, I'll say it, biased towards the Big Ten. Rutgers, you can't look at Rutgers metrics and look at A&M's metrics and come down on the side of Rutgers, my opinion. It's certainly Buzz Williams' opinion as well. They beat Alcorn State last night in the NIT. I'm sure their hearts weren't exactly in it, but it's worth watching because what happened to Texas A&M could easily happen to Ole Miss. Ole Miss is never going to have the type of schedule. At least there's nothing in past history to indicate that Ole Miss is going to have the Alabama schedule, the LSU schedule that gets you in at 9-9. Ole Miss has to win 11 games or more in the SEC, or they have to make a run. And I just look at it and think, what would the reaction here have been had Ole Miss been 9-9, 10-8 in the league, and beaten Florida and Auburn and Arkansas on consecutive days in the SEC tournament and then lost in the final to a very worthy Tennessee team and then not get in? People would be upset. And I get all the stuff about making fun of Ross Bjork, and as he told his story, I have no idea what Ross has said, but I know what Buzz Williams said. And when you watch him coach and then you listen to his statement, it was pretty genuine. It was from the heart. I thought it was interesting. So give it a listen because that could easily happen to other teams in the SEC not named Kentucky. frankly, not named Kentucky. It could happen to anybody else. For the league to only get 6 teams, and for Texas A&M, who finished Sunday with a net of around 41, to not get in, while teams with nets in the late 70s got in, it was wrong. He pointed it out. He said he lost respect for the NCAA, lost respect for the people, lost respect for the process. Those are strong statements from him, and I have a lot of respect for him saying it out loud. Because here's the problem, and this is why I'm very critical of a lot of the national reporters who cover college basketball. They're in bed with this tournament, which means they're in bed with the people who bracket the tournament. You never hear that criticism. There's a lot of talk about, did Tennessee deserve a 2 seed? Yes, first of all. They'll do those sorts of debates. But the national media, the guys who will be covering this tournament for the next 3 weeks, telling you that this is March, telling you that these games, this is the greatest tournament in the world, this is the best event in the world, and for the record, it is an awesome event. If you've never been, you should go. If you're in journalism and you've never covered it, you need to go cover it. It's a really cool event. But the selection process is shrouded in secrecy, and it doesn't need to be. It needs to be incredibly transparent. And when you see cats like Lenardi on Sunday being asked questions and he can't answer them, and Joe Lenardi knows what happens in that room, he won't answer them. There's a reason for that. It's bizarre. It's a basketball tournament. It's not national security. You're not trying to cure a disease. It's a basketball tournament. It should be completely transparent. What it takes to get in. Coaches should know long ahead of time what it's going to take to get in, what metrics are looked at, how those metrics are determined, who's on the committee, how they got on the committee, and what they discuss when the committee meets. Those are not difficult topics to make transparent. But the NCAA is not good at transparency. Never has been. That's why no one trusts it. And kudos to Buzz Williams, in my opinion, for speaking up and saying that out loud. Free agency rolling in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers has re-upped with Green Bay. All eyes today pretty much on Deshaun Watson, the Texans quarterback, now that he's been cleared of any criminal charges. Possible trade to the Falcons, the Saints, the Panthers, or even the Browns. The Browns situation's kind of odd. Baker Mayfield yesterday, pretty odd goodbye of sorts to Cleveland on social media. Not sure what that was about. So Baker Mayfield's days in Cleveland could be over depending on what happens with Deshaun Watson, but it does appear that there will be movement there. So anyway, we'll get to all those topics and more. If you guys want to in the stream, feel free to ask questions. I'll try to address those as well in addition to the mailbag questions. Speaking of the NCAA tournament, Brothrow is hosting a March Madness Bracket Challenge, giving away $300 cash. Sign up today at brothrow.com. Earn your first bracket entry, then earn one for every friend you sign up. There's no limit to the number of brackets you can earn, so stop paying the juice and bet with your friends on Brothrow. Don't forget, Ole Miss hit 5 home runs over the weekend against Oral Roberts. And Dead Soxy, as part of that, has launched its Out of the Park sales event. It runs through Sunday at midnight. Since Ole Miss hit 5 home runs, Dead Soxy will discount the number. They'll discount your order at deadsoxy.com with 50% off. If all you got to do is go to the site, hit promo code Rebel Grove. That's one word, all caps. One word, all caps. You get 50% off the best socks you'll ever put on your feet. Again, at deadsoxy.com. That deal runs through midnight on Sunday. Game Changer patches are the only 2-patch system available in the market to stop hangovers before they start. The warm-up patch is used before or while you drink. The overtime patch is used after you've been drinking to recover while you sleep. The all-natural ingredients will keep you in the game, ready for the next place. Go to GameChangerPatch.com. Promo code RebelGrove20 at checkout for 20% off your purchase. ACS, Automation Control Systems, LLC. It's owned by Clay McNutt, Baldwin, Mississippi. Established in 2013, it's a complete electrical control system solution provider and a Rockwell Automation recognized system integrator. ACS has a full-time dedicated emergency service and troubleshooting staff and a UL 508A panel shop. It's ACSLLCMS.com or 662-601-4381. I was in Lammons Fine Jewelry just the other day. It's 1126 North Lamar Boulevard in Oxford. They take great care of you. Alan and Nancy King and their staff. Whether you're looking for engagement rings, wedding rings, fine jewelry, watches, pearls, fashion jewelry, children's jewelry, collectibles, or more, Lamons is the gold standard in fine jewelry. Visit them at lamonsfinejewelry.com or call them at 662-234-2777. We'll be having the first Troy Brown show here in the next week or so, I think. I think that's the plan. Got some cool graphics and stuff set up with Troy. Got all that stuff ironed out over the last few days. They're on spring break this week, but start spring next week, so he and I will visit at some point with the first one of those shows. It's brought to you by Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. Don't forget, you want to make sure that you've got your cooling system ready to roll as spring gets going here soon and the last cold snap eases out of the area. You want to get in touch with Comer or Southern. Different names, same great products and services, same people. If you live in Oxford, Tupelo, or the surrounding area, call Comer. 662-801-1777. If you live in Hernando, Memphis, or the surrounding area, call the people at Southern, 662-429-4429. All right, so we'll get to some mailbag questions here. Appreciate you guys, your patience with me flying solo. I always am struck by the people who do solo shows by themselves. I don't know how they do it every day. Requires a ton of talent. And a lot of prep is what it boils down to. All right, so the question's from North Tampa Rebel. He says, I think Rippy had this one last week, but if you have $100 to spend on Ole Miss football, basketball, and baseball, how do you distribute the funds for maximum return on investment? This was pretty simple to me. I spend at least 75% of those dollars on football, maybe more. Now, if all I've got is these three sports and I don't have to do anything with Olympic sports, women's sports, non-revenue sports, if I've got 100% of a pie and I get to spend it on those three sports, I'm spending at least 75% on football. That's where I'm going to make my money. That's the ultimate gauge of success from a PR standpoint. I'm going to get the most bang for my buck. I'm going to get the most eyeballs. It's going to do the most. If I'm successful in football, it's going to do the most benefit for my athletics program, for my institution, over anything else. Now, after that, and this is where my opinion probably is different from a lot of people's, and maybe not, I don't know. I always come across as anti-baseball, and I'm not. I love the sport. I've been following all the Major League Baseball free agency stuff. I watch a lot of college baseball, especially when league play starts, because SEC play is pretty high-level stuff. But if you look at the last couple of weeks and for the next couple of weeks, at what you get if you're part of March Madness versus what you don't get if you're not part of March Madness, I think you have to invest in men's basketball more than you do baseball. Baseball, because of a number of things. One, the championship's not played until the summer months when people are on vacation. Two, because the games are so long. And three, because there's just not as much investment over the course of the season in some of the teams and players and traditions and stuff. It doesn't really resonate nationally the way that this tournament does. Tomorrow on Thursday, when everybody tips off and everybody's got a bracket and everybody's got a bracket challenge and an office pool and all of those things, people are keeping up with games. I mean, Vermont plays Arkansas tomorrow night, for example. It's one of the hot upset picks. Vermont's a 13. Arkansas's a 4. And everyone knows that most years a 13 beats a 4. 12s beat 5s. There's a lot of people that are picking UAB as the 12, Andy Kennedy's team, against Houston, the 5 seed. A lot of people calling for UAB to make a run. It's not about that. My point is that people are talking about UAB and Vermont in March. And it's only because of the power of the tournament. And when you're not a part of that tournament, I believe you have to sit down in the room at an athletics department You have to sit down in that room and say, hey, why are we not part of this? What are we doing? How close were we? And if you're far away, and this gets to some of the Ole Miss conversation, because this question is going to come up in this mailbag, I'll kind of touch on it here. If you're not close, and you haven't been close 2 of the last 3 years, and that's Ole Miss's case, I think you have to ask why. You have to address that. You need to be a part of this tournament because of the publicity that it generates. Like you guys in the stream right now are talking about South Dakota State and Providence. And I get it. 100% get it. People in Mississippi will watch South Dakota State and Providence because it's part of this tournament, because it impacts your bracket. If that game were a regular season game, you wouldn't even stop. You wouldn't even flip. You would flip past it so fast. You'd watch the Hallmark Channel, the Food Network before you would watch that. But eyes get glued to this. You learn people's stories. The networks do a pretty good job with it. The way that the tournament is presented, you need to be a part of the tournament. And if you're not part of the tournament, I think you have to soul search. It's why yesterday Jeff Goodman of Stadium, he was first to report that Ole Miss is bringing Kermit Davis back. It's what I'd expected. I think that's what we basically speculated. I won't say reported, because I've spent the last several days trying to get something concrete. I failed to do that. Got beat on the story. I'll own it. But there was a part of me that as the days went on that wondered if just maybe Ole Miss was reevaluating things. Because here's the thing. Ole Miss is in the SEC. And I can tell you without giving names that these SEC jobs are hotter than people think they are. There's more people right now in coaching. There are established Power 5 head coaches at non-SEC leagues that are watching these SEC openings. They're watching Florida, South Carolina, Missouri, Mississippi State. And they would have watched Ole Miss. There was interest in the Ole Miss job that's out there. There's no question about it. I know it for an absolute fact. And Ole Miss made a decision to give Kermit Davis what I would assume is another year. I don't know contract situations. Ole Miss is pretty quiet about that stuff. The questions need to be asked. I don't know whether they'll be answered. Kermit Davis's contract, was it extended? Is it going to be extended? Was the buyout extended? Because it was a year ago. After Ole Miss went 10-8 in the league, lost. They won an SEC tournament game, then lost in the quarterfinals to LSU in Nashville. Made the NIT, lost to Louisiana Tech in the first round of the NIT. Kermit Davis's contract was apparently not only extended, but the buyout was extended and rolled out. So according to sources, and listen, I could be wrong on this, but the sourcing is really good. I think Kermit Davis's buyout is about 3 years of his base salary, which puts him at just under $9 million, which is a tremendous buyout that becomes prohibitive in an economy like the one that we're in right now, at a time when you're asking for fans and alumni and boosters to give to a capital campaign. You're asking people to contribute to NILs. You're asking people to buy tickets. You're asking people to do all of the things that you always ask them to do, knowing that costs are going up. The cost of travel is going up. This is not a political comment, but you may have noticed gas prices are higher. Inflation's going on. Things are expensive, and so pocketbooks shrink up a little bit. And so then you say, hey, by the way, what do you think about $9 million to buy out a basketball coach so that we can go hire a new basketball coach? And obviously that becomes prohibitive. And so it leads the question to what can Ole Miss do to get into the tournament next year? And the answer is a complete roster overhaul. This question is going to get asked later. I've said this. My criticism of Kermit Davis is not personal. I like Kermit. Been great to me. I think he's a really good coach. I don't care about his sideline antics and all that stuff. Doesn't matter. I don't think that stuff matters. My issue with Kermit Davis is that in the last year, knowing that the transfer portal was probably the way that you build a roster at Ole Miss, they signed 4 high school kids a year ago. Only one was only one really contributed. Impactful was the word I was looking for. Deshaun Ruffin was absolutely impactful before he got hurt. And now they've added 4. They've signed 4 for this class coming in. So if you keep all of those guys, and I don't think they will, I'll touch on that in a minute. If you keep all of those guys, you've got 8 high school signees from a 2-year span on your roster. For those that don't know, Division I basketball programs get 13 scholarships. Not partial scholarships, 13 full scholarships. Each scholarship is a 100% scholarship, so you can't manipulate your scholarships. So they've got, if they keep that, they've got 8 guys that anchor, for lack of a better word, the roster. If they're fortunate enough to keep Matt Morrell, and different people have different opinions, but if they keep Matt Morrell, that's 9. Jamin Breakfield's back, that's 10. Jarkel Joyner could return. Different people have different opinions there, but if he did, that's 11. And that's before you even talk about Austin Crowley, Sammy Hunter, Luis Rodriguez. So for the record, I'll tell you what I expect going into this offseason. I expect that Sammy Hunter will transfer. My anticipation is Austin Crowley will transfer. I don't believe Jarkel Joyner will be back. I think Ole Miss will do everything it possibly can to keep Matt Morrell, and they have to. I think that at least 2 and maybe 3 of the prospects from last year's class, the one with Deshaun Ruffin, will transfer out. I'm going to have to assume at this point that they'll honor all 4 of the scholarships of the guys that are coming in as 2022 signees. And then they're going to have a lot of room in the portal. That's going to open up, 4 or 5 spots. And Ole Miss has to find 3 starters, realistically, out of the portal. You got to find a big, need to find a stretch 4, got to find a wing who can shoot. Ty Fagan will be back, I anticipate. So it's a weird roster, and they've got to address it in the transfer portal. And where that's problematic is that everybody else is in the portal as well. Everyone else is using the portal as well. And the league's going to be better next season. Kentucky's going to be Kentucky. Alabama's going to be much improved. Arkansas is going to be much improved. Auburn's still going to be talented. Texas A&M's going to be better. Tennessee's going to be very good. They've recruited at an incredibly high level. The league's just tough. And so you've got to address those issues, and now you have this thing hanging over you in the portal with no one's going to say it out loud, but let's be real, you get one shot. Because if Ole Miss is, say, 6-12 in the league next year, 7-11 in the league next year, you can't run that back for a 6th season. Kermit in the last 3 seasons has gone 6-12, lost on the first day of the SEC tournament. There's a media narrative that gets spit out, and I think it's just lazy that, well, the COVID year. But Ole Miss finished its season in a traditional manner literally hours before the COVID thing canceled college basketball. Had there been no COVID, that Ole Miss team wasn't going to a postseason tournament. Then last season, Ole Miss went 10-8 in the league. We talked about it. They won a game, lost a game, probably came a game short. Probably get in if they beat LSU in the tournament last year on Friday, but it's not for certain. And then this year, of course, was kind of an unmitigated disaster. And some of that was injuries, and some of that was roster construction. And the injury part's real, but if you don't acknowledge the roster construction issue, then I don't really have much desire to listen to the rest of it. And I've yet to hear, hey, this roster was poorly put together. Instead, what I've heard is repeatedly that, hey, if we don't have injuries, this is an NCAA tournament team. And I mean this not disrespectfully, but I don't agree with that. I don't think this was an NCAA tournament team. You look at the teams in the league that didn't make the tournament: Texas A&M, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Florida. Those teams had rosters that were put together better than Ole Miss's. So when Ole Miss says that Mississippi State didn't make the tournament, when Ole Miss says that, I just think, no, Had you not had injuries, maybe you would have been in that grouping. Maybe you would have gone 8-10. Maybe you could have gotten to 9-9. But I don't think you were an NCAA tournament team. So I do think you have to look at it realistically and say, this isn't as close as we thought it was, and we've got to fix it in one transformation in the portal, and they don't have a lot of margin for error. They've got to get the portal right. They've got to get impactful players who can shoot and impactful players who can produce on the post. And if they do that with Morrell, and assuming Morrell returns and Ruffin's healthy, well, maybe from that point you move forward. Maybe that's a team that is explosive. That would be an incredibly good backcourt. And there's a question that we'll get to a little bit later. But anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on that story from yesterday. All right, so question number 2. So I didn't finish. I'd probably go 70 football, 25 basketball, and 5 baseball, if I even gave baseball anything. Chat Reb says, do you think that Will Wade will get a similar NCAA blackball that Hugh Freeze has evidently received? Also, do you think that having Mark Emmert in the room can mitigate the penalties against the football program? Let's face it, the totality charges are much worse, both monetarily and ethically, than what the NCAA had against Ole Miss, including the made-up charges. Well, there's a lot there. All right, first part, Hugh Freeze didn't get an NCAA blackball. He's coaching at Liberty, making a bunch of money. He got an SEC blackball that, frankly, I think Greg Sankey said as long as Ole Miss had sanctions, as long as Ole Miss was still inside the sanction window, he was going to strongly discourage Hugh Freeze returning to the SEC. I think Hugh Freeze could return to the SEC now. I just think people look at Hugh Freeze and they dive into what happened and they lose the taste for it. So that's my answer there. Do I think Will Wade gets a black? Yeah, I think Will Wade's going to get a multi-year show cause. But Kelvin Sampson's back coaching. If you think Will Wade's completely done, I probably disagree, but I anticipate at least a 3-year show cause, probably more than that. Does Mark Emmert in the room help mitigate the penalties against the football program? Realistically, yes. I don't trust the NCAA. I don't think they're a very ethical organization. I think the people that run it are dirty. I think college athletics are dirty in large part because of the bias that happens inside the rooms in Indianapolis. So Mark Emmert in the room helps. What also helps LSU, in fairness, is that LSU got ahead of the football part a little bit. They did the postseason ban on themselves in 2020, which was smart. It shouldn't count, but it did. So they got ahead of it a little bit. But here's what's interesting is LSU worked really hard, lobbied very hard for the football portion of this to not be lumped into the same NOA with basketball. And it was. And that tells you that the NCAA is angry, that they want to scout. I said this the other day. I think the basketball program at LSU is going to get absolutely hammered. And I don't think the football penalties, which have never been accepted by the NCAA, I don't think those are going to stick completely. I think there's going to be more. I don't think the football program is going to be torn apart by the NCAA the way that maybe Ole Miss's was. But I do agree with you here. The money was different. The ethics, laundering money through a children's hospital, for God's sake, is a lot worse of a look than Ole Miss giving Laramie Tunsil's stepfather less than $1,000. It's hard to justify those two things. It's hard to look at those two things and say, oh, those are the same. The NCAA might try to do it. LSU's going to try to do it, and LSU's job is to defend itself. But I think the penalties are going to be a little bit worse than some people thought. Orange Beach Rebs linked a Larry Bird video. I watched it last night. Includes Michael Jordan saying Larry Bird was an effing problem. So the question is, for fun, if Larry Bird were coming out of college, what would be your draft profile of Bird coming out of college, assuming the skill set, but against today's players? Where do you think he'd be drafted in the NBA draft? what teams could utilize him or pass on him, what round. Look, Larry Bird's one of a handful of people that it doesn't matter what generation they played in. Larry Bird could be in the 80s. He could play today. Larry Bird is kind of Kevin Durant. He's an elite scorer. He was a better defender than he gets credit for. He could attack the basket. Larry Bird saved his right hand, played with just his left hand in an NBA game, told the team he was playing with just his left hand, and still scored 50 points. He's an elite talent. And there's only a handful of people from that era that you can say are demonstrably better than Larry Bird. It's like Michael Jordan. That's about it. I mean, Larry Bird's an elite player. He would be a very high lottery pick. He would play for anybody. Larry Bird at his prime. There's a tendency, I think, for us to remember Larry Bird at the end of his career. The end of that Celtics run when his back was injured and he lost a little bit of his shape. And he had the Celtics had drafted Len Bias to kind of change their athleticism to give them some youth. And then Len Bias passed away 72 hours later. People forget that Celtics team still went on to win a title. That was an elite group, and Larry Bird was the best player on that team. I think people forget because of how great Jordan was. People forget how great Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were. I remember I wrote this the other day. I was 9 years old, and that game came on NBC. It was Indiana State, Michigan State for the title. And it was the beginning. It was the first time that you got to see those two guys go against each other. And it was that way for the better part of 10 years. If Magic and Bird were on TV at the same time you watched. That Lakers-Celtics thing was must-watch television. It rejuvenated the NBA. It set up the Jordan era. I think most guys in the NBA will tell you that. Bird could play today. Bird was a stud. And I was a Lakers fan. I cheered against Bird. I hated Larry Bird and Danny Ainge and Robert Parrish and Kevin McHale and Dennis Johnson and Cornbread Maxwell and those cats. But that dude was phenomenal. He did things. Those two teams were amazing. You go back and watch those teams, the Lakers with Magic and Kareem and James Worthy and Byron Scott and Kurt Rambis and all those teams were Michael Cooper. Those teams were amazing teams. Those were great. The ESPN did a 30 on 30 about that rivalry. I want to say it was like Ice Cube narrated it. It was really good. You should watch it. Yeah, Larry Bird could play today. No question. He'd be a high draft pick. The Oxford Exxon Podcast brought to you by the College Corner. It's your one-stop Rebel Shop, 2 locations in the Jackson area. In Ridgeland, it's next to Fleet Feet. In Flowood, it's next to Half Shell. If you don't live in Jackson, it's okay. Go to collegecornerstore.com. Plus, you can find them on Facebook and Instagram, the largest selection of Rebel gear in central Mississippi. We'll have a Mind on My Money tomorrow. It's brought to you by Pinnacle. Pinnacle based in Madison, Mississippi. They've got clients in more than 20 states, advisors in multiple states. At Pinnacle, investing is treated like a commodity. Decisions are made using objective information and research, not emotions. So regardless of your level of wealth, Pinnacle would sit down with you. They'll listen to your goals, study your expenses, put forth a comprehensive, detailed financial and retirement plan built just for you. It's mypinwealth.com, MYPINN wealth.com. We're also brought to you by John Edwards, Regency Travel Incorporated in Memphis. John's part of Virtuoso. It's a worldwide network of travel partners that allows him to supply his clients with added values, unique benefits simply not available to other travelers. If you're thinking about a vacation, you want to make sure it's a special trip that creates a lifetime of unique memories. So get in touch with John. Give him some parameters. Give him a budget. He will give you options. 901-494-3387 or jedwards@regencytravel.net. Also brought to you by Opa, Oxford's newest restaurant on the square. Gyros, wraps, kebabs. redfish, lamb chops, handcrafted cocktails, frozen libations, an amazing candlelit patio, all of that and more. 306 South Lamar Boulevard in Oxford, just south of the Square Courthouse. That's OPA. We're also brought to you by Grenada Nissan. If you're in the market for a Nissan vehicle, Grenada Nissan's the place to go. They've got a complete selection of new and previously owned Nissan vehicles. Great lease deals as well. It's GrenadaNissanUSA.com. And we're brought to you by Service Specialist Staffing and Recruiting Agency. They've been connecting great job opportunities to candidates since 1967. If you're on the job hunt, whether you're seeking an entry-level position or a seasoned professional, they have opportunities across the board. Whether you're in IT, engineering, dentistry, accounting, law, manufacturing, human resources, or more, Service Specialist, their goal is to get to know you, your strengths, and to see what you're looking for in your next career move to find you the right fit. It's free for the candidate. All conversations are kept confidential, so you have nothing to lose by giving them a call. 662-832-5138 to talk to Will, Sydney, or Kelsey, or check out their new and improved website at servicespecialistltd.com. All right, so we'll get back into mailbag questions. Let's see where I left off. Yeah, Grind says in the thread, Bird would get posterized every night. Bird was a bad man. I just disagree. Larry Bird in his prime could play in today's NBA, no problem. He would abuse some of these 19-year-old kids coming out. That guy was vicious. All right, Selena Reb says, what would be the one place that you would travel to cover Ole Miss for a regular season game? For example, would a trip to Hawaii be worth it if you could write it off? So here's the question that we have to address all the time, and that is, what's coverage going to look like starting this season coming up? Is everything still going to be available on Zoom? To get post-game stuff, will you have to be there? The last two seasons, obviously, because of the COVID stuff, everything was on Zoom. You didn't have to be there. There was really no incentive to travel. You didn't need to travel. So we did the post-game show, which has become, I think, really popular. Almost to the point that people demand the post-game show with the call-ins and the interactivity. So the question's not, would it be worth a trip to Hawaii to write it off if you could? Because the answer to that is sure. The problem that we face moving forward and that we've got to address, and it's one of the reasons when people are like, hey, are you guys going to hire a recruiting guy? The answer to that is no, not by itself, because we're better off hiring somebody who is versatile enough to give us said versatility in our coverage. Because what happens if one of us has to go to the game, travel on Friday, at the game Saturday, so you're traveling back Sunday? There aren't many of those games. I mean, realistically, most of Ole Miss's trips are pretty quick. But if that person can't be available for the post-game show, certainly not all of it, because we just don't have that technology. So it's complicated. Would it be worth it to go to Hawaii? Sure. We go anywhere. I mean, we've traveled. I went out to Berkeley for a game. Before COVID, I'd been to basically every road game except for the one time they went to Knoxville where I had the flu and I just simply couldn't go. I went to every game. I've been to all the SEC places that they've played, and we've always traveled to games pre-2020. Our question now is, how do we get back to what we were doing and still maintain what we did over the last couple of years that we found people liked so much and that we were able to monetize? And I don't know that answer. Texas via Tennessee Rebels says, Phil Mickelson's image argument with the PGA Tour has me wondering, you, Rebel Grove, as a utilizer of the NIL opportunities, do you own all the content that comes from said utilization? Could you create NFTs or any other types of monetization from the content you created with NIL athletes? So the first question is, yes, we own the content. We market it. We own it. We publish it. Our contracts with the athletes, like we have a contract with Troy Brown We have a contract with Mason Brooks. We're working on another contract that is just literally at the one inch line that will be done. And we own those contracts we have with the player is essentially us and the player. It goes through a business, and we go through the Grove Collective on 2 of those, certainly. But, yeah, we own the content. The honest answer to the NFT portion of your question is I have absolutely no idea. That's not in the contract. So I guess we'd have to amend something in the contract if we were to do that. And then this is just me being honest. I don't know enough about the whole NFT thing to know how you would even go about that. But could we create NFTs or other types of monetization from the content with the athletes? I guess we could. I would think we would have to include the athlete in that. We'd have to have his or her blessing, and we'd have to amend the contract accordingly, but I don't know that. I'm not an attorney. Kyle the Hoss says, does every AD in the country watch the NCAA tournament and create files on potential coaches? Do they look at it like mass interviews? They should. Yeah, I think if you are an AD, you're watching the tournament. Whether you're the AD at Kentucky or you're the AD at Colorado State or anywhere in between, yeah, I think you're watching the tournament. But you're not just watching the tournament. You're watching a lot of – if you're Keith Carter, for example, you're watching a lot of college football around the country. You're talking to your colleagues around the country. You always have a list because the people that you hire are human. They could get sick. There could be a tragedy. They could leave. There could be a scandal. Any number of things could happen that would force you into the market for a new coach at the blink of an eye. Yeah, you want to be prepared. So to finish my statement, yeah, you're watching a lot of – if you're Keith, you're watching a lot of college basketball. Not just in the tournament, but all season. And you're talking to people about it. You're reading about it. You are informed about it. You have a list of coaches in your proverbial desk drawer. And not only the coaches, but their agents. You are doing some background on them. I would think you'd want at least 10 to 15, maybe 20 names that you would be ready to explore at the drop of a pen where you could move forward. Is the tournament one that you look at it as a interview? Yeah, I think so. I think you watch guys in the tournament. You watch coaches. You watch young coaches. You're watching the young guy at Chattanooga, Paris, for example. I would be watching Drew Valentine at Loyola Chicago, just 30 years old. I love his poise. You're watching guys like that and getting a feel for them, asking yourself if they would fit at your place. Maybe exploring it a little bit in agent channels a little bit to find out what they're about. I would do a little background. I would do that in every major men's sport if I'm an AD, and then I have associates and assistants inside my building that are doing that exact same thing on Olympic sports because I only have so much time. And then I have to have those people that I trust where if something happens in volleyball or softball or rifle or gymnastics or whatever the case may be, those people are ready to give me a list of, hey, here's 5 people we need to talk to right now. But yes, I would be watching the tournament like a hawk. And I'm sure Keith does. I'm sure most ADs do. Walnut says, Pate, I think referring to Josh Pate, had a segment on his 247 show. He's a travel food junkie, so I'll ask you, what's your favorite college town you've gone to, either covering or visiting or whatever? And number 2, most importantly, the best food scene in a college town with at least one restaurant rec. All right, so the first part of this I'm pretty good at because when I would go travel, when I was a beat writer covering Auburn, when I was a beat writer covering Ole Miss, when I went to campuses, I kind of checked them out. I checked out the towns because I was there by myself. I was entertaining myself. I'm not as up to date on best food scene in college towns because I don't travel that much. And some of the places that I've been to that I like, it's just because I've been to them. Favorite college town that I've been to. I mean, look, we've been over this for a while. When I first started, one of my favorite places was Baton Rouge. Loved it. When I was covering Auburn, I always loved those trips. I liked Baton Rouge. I loved games at Tiger Stadium. I thought their pregame was fantastic. I liked everything about games there. And over the last, what's that been, 15 years, that opinion has changed a lot. I've gone from loving going to Baton Rouge to hating going to Baton Rouge. So that's changed for me. And I don't know whether that's Baton Rouge with Katrina, whether that's me getting older or whatever it is, but I'm not as crazy about it anymore. I've always liked Auburn. I've always liked going to games there. I love Acre, the restaurant there. I think it's one of the just most fantastic places. I love it. I like games at Jordan-Hare, though I haven't been since the new setup, and people tell me that I won't like it as much. So I'm almost reluctant to go because my memories as a beat writer are pretty good. Obviously, I go to Fayetteville a lot with the girls there. I like Fayetteville. I think it has a pretty cool food scene in and around Dixon. I like Bordino's. There's some other places there that I like. I like Columbia, South Carolina a lot more than most people. Most people that I talk to tell me they think it's dirty and they don't like it. And every time I've been, I've always enjoyed it. I've always found it to be fun. And then I'm a big fan of Lexington, Kentucky. I think that's from a food scene standpoint, just an atmosphere standpoint. I love it. I think Lexington's really cool. So I don't know. I don't know if that's the best answer in the world. I like a lot of campuses. There aren't many campuses that I just dislike. I've always enjoyed going to colleges and seeing stadiums and all that stuff. That really hasn't changed as I've gotten older. I mean, I spent 3 days in West Lafayette, Indiana, and thought it was pretty cool by the end. So I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I'm pretty easy to please there. Let's see. Kingfish 86 says, do you believe this Ole Miss basketball team was turning the corner at LSU pre-Ruffin injury? Good enough to keep Kermit off the hot seat? I think the misstep Kermit made was in discussing this team fully healthy as an NCAA tournament team. I agree. That's not accurate. I agree. He says, do I believe if Ruffin stays healthy throughout, Kermit's not on the hot seat? How good can Ruffin be in the league? How good can Morrell be? So, yeah, I do think they were turning a corner. There was a stretch there, concluding with the LSU game, which is when Deshaun got hurt, where they had won 4 out of 5. They beat LSU that night. That was 4 wins in 5 games. The only loss was a home loss to Arkansas. I can't remember, a week earlier or something like that. Maybe it was a few days earlier. I don't remember the exact timing of it, but they lost at home to Arkansas by 9 points, 10 points, something like that. And that was the only loss. They won 4 out of 5 games. Beat Kansas State. Beat Florida, it seems like. I can't remember who all they played. And I thought Deshaun and Matt Morrell, I thought they really played well off one another. Deshaun had missed a lot of the first part of the season with the hand injury. He was back. I thought he was beginning to really find his stride, and I thought you got to see he and Matt play well together. I thought Deshaun Ruffin improved Luis Rodriguez's game, created he made Luis more of a threat on the wing, because Luis got a little more open looks. So, yes, do I think that they were going to win enough that maybe some of the hot seat talk would have dissipated? I do. I don't think they would have lost 9 out of 10 down the stretch, or 10 out of 11 down the stretch, which is what I think happened. I don't think that would have happened. Do I think that was an NCAA tournament team? I don't. And I agree with you completely, Kingfish. That was a mistake on Kermit's part. It's something that Kermit has said privately, though, which makes me wonder if it's something that he truly believes, or if it's just kind of a propaganda point, or if it's just something that he said to instill confidence in his team. And those things can be true at the same time. I don't think that was ever going to be a tournament team. Even if Robert Allen doesn't get hurt, if Deshaun never gets hurt, if Jarkel Joyner never gets hurt. I don't think that's a tournament team. Is it better than 13 and 19? Absolutely. But is it an NCAA tournament team? When you look at the league and the 6 teams that got in, was it going to be as good as Alabama? I don't think so. As good as LSU? I don't think so. And then I don't think you can put it in the same conversation with the 4 teams at the top of the league. Kentucky and Tennessee and Auburn and Arkansas. I don't think he was in that realm. How good can Deshaun Ruffin be? I think he can be really good. I do think for him to be to maximize his talents because of his size, I think Ole Miss absolutely has to improve its shooters. I think it has to have guys on the wings that are 3-point threats, where teams can't just collapse on Deshaun and hit him and hit him and hit him. Because look, he had 2 injuries from getting hit. So you do have to, when you're considering him, you do have to ask, okay, well, when I say tough, I don't mean mentally tough. I mean his body. How can his body handle the pounding in this league? And so you have to do some things to minimize that. I think they have to have bigs who can score. I think Deshaun on a team that has weapons is a real threat. And then I love Matt Morrell's game. I love everything about it. But Matt needs a point guard who can create. Because the one thing Matt's game doesn't have is he's not really a guy that can bring the ball up the floor and create offense. He can score off the bounce. He can catch and shoot. He's physical. He's got a great body. There's a lot of things Matt can do. Matt's game benefits from having someone like Deshaun on the floor, and I think you saw that later in the year when Deshaun went out and they were having to run Crowley or Jarkel Joyner at the point. Well, Matt's game suffered a little bit. He's still a tremendous player. If I'm Ole Miss, priority 1 is keeping him on that roster. Salad Thunder says he's taking his family and heading to the Hill Country to visit his brother and his family. He and his wife are 10 years sober. Salad Thunder's kid is 2. His brother's kids are 2. What should we do with ourselves? Cook something exotic? What do you suggest? How do we entertain 2-year-olds without drinking? Man, I don't know. My kids are old now. I mean, Carson turned 16 in October. I don't remember them being 2. I mean, I guess you could take them fishing or something. I don't know. I don't even know where the Hill Country is. Good luck. That's all I can tell you. Rebnut says, which NCAA tournament team is your favorite? What teams are in your Final Four? Who's your overall champion? I don't know. I don't know that I have a favorite. There's certainly some people that I know that I'm cheering for. I think everybody knows that. In the South, I mean, if you told me I could pick a team, I'd pick UAB for a number of reasons. But I do think Tennessee's going to win the South as a 3 seed. I think a Tennessee-Arizona Elite 8 game would be fantastic. In the West, I'm cheering for the 2 SEC teams. I'd love to see Arkansas make a run. I'd love to see Alabama make a run because I think it's good for the league. I'm interested in Gonzaga because of Chet Holmgren, of course. We'll be watching those games because the Thunder pick early in the draft. I'm interested in Duke. Obviously, the storyline with Krzyzewski in his last season. I think Texas Tech is grossly underrated. I think they're dangerous. There's a couple of upsets that I think are potential there. New Mexico State over UConn in a 5-12. Vermont over Arkansas is a possibility in a 4-13. I'm interested in Memphis as the 8, but my pick out of that is probably Gonzaga, I guess, to win it. Although there's multiple teams in that bracket that I think can beat Gonzaga. In the Midwest, it's Kansas is the 1. They're good. I don't know that I picked them. I think Iowa is a very dangerous 5. No jokes. South Dakota State over Providence in a 13-4 is a possibility. Iowa State over LSU in a 6-11 is a possibility. I really like Wisconsin. If you haven't watched Johnny Davis, you should. Auburn is the 2, is the super interesting team. Talked about them all year. What happens with Auburn late in a game in the NCAA tournament when their guards get tested? Can their guards make plays? If they can, I think Auburn could win this region. If they can't, Auburn could be in trouble in a Sweet 16 game. And Auburn, Wisconsin, 2-3 Sweet 16 game would be a lot of fun to watch because Wisconsin's guards are special. And they would test Auburn's guards. And Wisconsin can lock you down defensively and take away something. So that would be a fun game to watch. And then in the East, Baylor's the 1. St. Mary's is a really strong 5. UCLA's a dangerous 4. I love Purdue. Watched them all season. They're a 3. Kentucky's the 2 there. I like Kentucky. I kind of think Kentucky wins that region for some reason. But a Kentucky-Purdue Sweet 16 game in the 2-3 would be a lot of fun to watch. I haven't even gone far enough to pick who I think a champion would be. I like the tournament, though. I'll watch a ton of it. You guys probably would be better picking than I would. Yeah, Alan says, I hope we get to see Jalen Duren versus Chet and Timmy in the second round. Yeah, you're referring to Jacob Tammy. Yeah, I do too. Duren's a guy that people talk about in the draft. Jalen Duren from Memphis. People talk about him being the 6th pick, 7th pick in the draft, and they talk about Chet Holmgren going anywhere from 1 to 3. I watched Duren in the American Conference championship game, and he kind of disappeared again, and so I didn't like that. So those are the kind of games that I'm interested in watching as well. Chase Pruitt with the super chat says a few more injuries. First of all, Chase, thank you. A few more injuries, and Keith Carter will give Bianco a sympathy year like he did Davis. Always a lot of excuses made for Ole Miss coaches. So it's the conversation that I'd like to have with Keith Carter. How did he factor the injuries in? Because injuries are part of sports. Guys get hurt. Did he view this team as an NCAA tournament team before the injuries to Robert Allen and Jarkel Joyner and Deshaun Ruffin? Those are questions I'd love to have answered. I don't know. A year ago, Ole Miss had some pitching injuries, or one specific with Gunnar Hoagland that changed the course of their team. Tim Elko missed a bunch of time before he came back and limped around on his one leg. How did those get viewed? But injuries happen in sports. Like, look around college baseball right now. Arkansas's lost an ace. Mississippi State's lost 2 pitchers. Seems like LSU lost a pitcher. People are losing pitchers left and right. Do those, Ole Miss is – I'm not convinced that Derek Diamond's completely healthy. How does that all get factored in? I don't know the answers to that. So I'd have to talk to them about whether those were excuses that were taken into consideration or not. I can tell you that we're brought to you by The Rogue. The Rogue is your destination for fine men's clothing. They sponsor the Peyton Chatney Show. We'll talk to Peyton next week after Ole Miss and Auburn. Get back on a regular schedule now that spring break will be concluded by then. At The Rogue, their stylists hand-select pieces from top designers, from work to lifestyle to nightlife. There's the perfect something for everyone. At The Rogue, all the best items from Peter Millar, Martin Dingman, Jack Victor, Halsey, True Grit, and more. 4450 I-55 North in Jackson, or at therogue.com. Don't just accept what you see, but imagine something new. Step forward and chase after a better version of yourself. Every day, Corinth Dental is helping people reinvent themselves. One smile at a time. Dr. Bubba McQueen, Dr. Jenny Beth Hendrick are devoted to restoring and enhancing the natural beauty of your smile using conservative, state-of-the-art procedures, including Invisalign. These clear aligners are the virtually invisible way to improve your smile. So call Corinth Dental today for a no-cost digital scan of your teeth. Let them show you the way to a straighter, healthier smile. 12 months, no interest, no down payment, financing available at corinthdental.com. We're also brought to you by Bell & Grove. Based out of Chattanooga, Daryl Oliver and Evan Dial built Bell & Grove. It's a logistics provider with more than 35 years of transportation industry experience. They specialize in domestic freight movement throughout the continental U.S. They can navigate through supply chain issues while also leaning on their partner carriers to get the most competitive rate possible for their customers. In addition, Bell & Grove can help customers design a custom solution for their shipping needs. Whether your business is in need of moving a truckload, a partial shipment, or a flatbed, Bell & Grove can accommodate you. They also provide both air and ground expedited services for customers who need to move product quickly. For more information, Call Daryl Oliver at 865-672-6557. Southern Traditions Farm is a 68-acre, 32-stall upscale equestrian training and boarding facility in Canton, Mississippi. 2 sand rings, a grass ring, miles of wooded trails. A lot to be offered at Southern Traditions, including horseback riding offerings, from beginner lessons with trainer Susan Walt to buying your first horse and competing at nationally recognized competitions under the teachings of one of the best young professionals in the sport, Bowers Cone. Southern Traditions has high aspirations for the future. Along with owners Ben and Hillary Craddock, Southern Traditions has become one of the leading equestrian facilities in Mississippi. For questions or information about lessons, boarding, or sales, contact Bowers at bowerscone, the number 1, at gmail.com, or message them on Facebook or Instagram at Southern Traditions Farm. All right, so back in to the mailbag here. Deuce McAllister 22, or Deuce McCluster 22, one of my favorite names. Have you watched any of Winning Time yet on HBO? I haven't. I need to. I haven't done it. I'll try to do that and give you some thoughts at some point. I'm bad about keeping up with TV series. I just don't watch many. I don't watch a lot of television, honestly. I don't know what I do, but I don't watch television. Coach Nuke, my buddy, says which games will get better ratings? The first night of the NIT on ESPN or the NCAA First Four on True TV? With baseball getting started, which all-time record would be the hardest to break? The NCAA will get better ratings, even the First Four. I don't think anybody watches the NIT. It's awful. When you're in the NIT, it's just, you guys have been to it. It's depressing. The only time that the NIT has anything worthwhile is if it's a super young team that you can tell is going places that just missed the NCAA, and they're using it as a springboard into next season. And that's just very rare. Usually it's teams that don't give a damn. There's a lot of money that can be made betting the NIT, by the way, because you can figure out what team just does not care. And if they're going up against the aforementioned team that does care, you can make some money there. Gorve Gorvy Rebs, I guess, 18 says, with Kermit coming back, do you expect any staff changes? Well, here's the thing. There probably need to be staff changes, because if there's a knock, and there is on this team, the knock is that they don't have enough connected recruiters on the staff. Obviously, Levi Watkins is a connected recruiter, and Ole Miss can't afford to lose him. And there are some rumblings out there that there's going to be a market for Levi, and I don't think Kermit can lose Levi Watkins. There's no sign that he's going to shake up his staff. And at this point, getting another Levi onto your staff would be very difficult, because realistically, you've got 1 year, and that's it. And so if you hire somebody, he says, okay, well, we're going to move to Oxford, and if we don't make the tournament, I'm going to be moving again. Well, those kinds of coaches, the coaches who would take that job probably can't help you unless it's someone that's attached to a transfer portal player, which is a possibility. But in terms of going out and getting a super connected coach who's got an established gig, who's a great recruiter to come fix your issue right now, unless you're throwing a lot of money at it, and that would be a multi-year deal, I don't know that that's realistic. So I think Kermit's window to make that change was last year. It's probably when he should have done it. And he didn't. And obviously he believed, and I don't necessarily disagree with him, he believed that last year's team was an NCAA tournament caliber team. He believed that last year's team, if you change some of what happened at the beginning of that year with the COVID outbreak that forced them to miss some time and to shut things down, he believes that team was headed to the tournament. And he's probably right. And so I think he thought that he didn't have a problem. And meanwhile, there were people around it who looked at it and said, you're not bringing in the right type of transfer portal guys, and you're signing too many high school kids who can't help you. And that ended up being accurate. They just didn't have enough shooting, and the end of their bench didn't have enough contributors. It had too much, for lack of a better term, dead weight. I'm sure they're great kids, but they didn't help. So that's where they are today. And I don't know that now you have enough time to fix it. So now I think you've got your current staff that you have to hang on to Watkins, and you have to hope that you can get into the portal and you can find shooters. You can find another productive big. They've had success there 2 years in a row with Romello White and then Nas Brooks. You've got to find another impactful player in the post. You've got to find wings who can knock shots down. You've got to convince Matt Morrell to stay. You need to keep Levi Watkins. You need to be healthy, and you need to be super efficient in the portal, bringing in people who can fill roles. That's the challenge. You've got to recruit the portal sort of the way that Eric Musselman did last season at Arkansas, coming off of an Elite Eight where they lost a lottery pick in Moses Moody. He went into the portal and found pieces who could fill roles, a defensive guy here, a shooter here, a backup guard who could be a change of pace. You've got to do those kinds of things in the portal to have success. And if they do, you can make a big bounce from where they were. And if you don't, probably going to repeat it. And if you repeat it, at this point, a lot of people are going to be angry this time next year because they're going to say that running it back another season was completely unnecessary. So it becomes a fascinating year. And listen, there's going to be criticism, and we're going to find out how thin-skinned some people are. Because I'm not talking about media criticism. There's going to be criticism of the way that team got put together, and they need to learn from it because these next few weeks in the transfer portal are absolutely critical for that program, for Kermit, for creating the kind of excitement among fans that get you guys to go back to games. Because if that arena next season feels like what that arena this season felt like, that's an indictment on everybody involved with this decision, and that's reality. Thanks to everybody for asking questions. Thanks to everybody for being a part of the stream. Again, later today, I'm going to tape a SEC baseball podcast with Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. We'll bring that to you in the thread. I should say in the stream at some point, either late today, early tomorrow, to get you ready for the NCAA tournament and for the first week of SEC baseball. So thanks to everybody for being a part of the show. Again, thanks to Whitney McNutt, Tommy Morgan Incorporated Realtors for sponsoring the Mailbag. Until next time, I'm Neal McCready. Take care.